Hey Collective, it's Al, and today's video is actually going to be accompanying a piece, of course, I'm releasing on LinkedIn, which specifically tackles the topic of empowerment and voicing your opinions to the world at large. Because as we all know, in America here, we're in the middle of some very serious midterm elections, and one of the things that we're finding is that due to the polarity that exists between the two extremist sides, both on the left and on the right, many of Americans are feeling disenfranchised, and a lot of people are actually starting to believe that their voice doesn't matter and that they actually might as well not exist. A sentiment that is quite dangerous in the wrong hands, and something that the people who are monopolizing and kind of guiding us in the wrong direction are using to their advantage. Because what they do is that they make humanity feel as though they individually don't exist. And they do sweeping generalizations that instill fear-mongering or somehow create some sort of divisiveness so as to disempower the species from moving forward. And we get stuck in what we call the battle of the words. But what's happening increasingly more and more, especially the more technologically advanced we get as a society, is that we're starting to realize that words are like bullets and they exist forever online. And so sometimes what we respond to in anger and an emotional outburst has long-term repercussions to the effectiveness that we as leaders can instill upon the people. Because one of the greatest dangers that we're facing now is this idea that these extremist groups that are the loudest are the actual voices of the people, when we know firsthand that they absolutely are the complete opposite to who we are. And in many of the houses, what's happening is we're starting to become cognizant of these infiltrators that are actually working on some sort of other agenda that has something to do with the implosion of democracy. And I couldn't help but really think about that as I was writing the piece, and the implications it has with some of them being so connected to what's going on in other nations where war is at play, and how distracted America has become in this battle of the words and in this implosion methodology, which is instilling in people anger, and it's making it so resentful that nothing is changing. So as a conscious leader, one of the things that I realized when I was really considering how I was going to speak on the topic of the election, one of the things that weighed heavy on me is I don't really care which side of the coin or you vote on. It's not so much of interest to a conscious leader how you vote, it's about you just voting. Because if you can't even show up for yourself in the world, then how do you ever expect leaders or people to represent you in the future? Because we don't really know what your concerns are. We don't know what it is you believe in anymore, because you've let these evil entities create so much havoc in our world that you've bought into this belief that there's no hope for our future. And one of the things that does is it disheartens a lot of leadership around the world that is now stepping into position as the sons of light to face these sons of darkness. And though that has a major spiritual implication to it, what I wanted to clarify is that sometimes the sons of light can just mean enlightenment, wisdom, guidance, and clarity, integrity, humility, and kindness, and all of that. Whereas the sons of darkness are about willful ignorance, fear-mongering, hatred, divisiveness. And so when we speak to this, even as conscious leaders and as spiritual beings, we have to then clarify it to include everyone. Because what we're missing in our world is inclusion, right? Everyone feels like they don't belong to anything anymore. There's no sense of community, and we're finding ourselves constantly like butting heads all the time. You know, forgetting that we used to be a race that was able to debate things and actually show up for the actual topics and the issues and actually engage that, as opposed to trying to dig as much dirt up as you can of the other person. Because one of the things that really drives away the middle of our population, the majority of us, is this extremist vantage point of always trying to tear down the other person. There's so much negativity that a lot of people just want to go away from it and they don't want to deal with it. And that is the aim, right? That is what these evil people are trying to do. They don't care about America. They really don't. They actually want to take control of it and remove freedoms if it doesn't agree with their freedoms. And it's happening on both sides. And so what ends up happening is that we then feed into that anger and fear-mongering, and we become so disenfranchised that we stop even showing up for ourselves and actually just be very, very clear that not all people who are pro-life are extremists or people. They're not people who belong to an extremist organization that took away your rights. They're just human beings who vehemently disagree with your stance on this topic, right? And so that's a lot triggering to many people. But instead of not being triggered by it, what we've done is we've played into their hand because we've vilified even people who are not extremists. And what that does is it further and further divides us to a place where no one can come to the table and break bread. And we're losing so much in the process. I now see nothing but reporters, I'm going to put it in quotations because they're not really reporters anymore. They're opinionists who are out there showing their emotional range and how outraged they are by every little thing, that they've lost the integrity to stand in the middle and speak to the public about the issues at hand. They've lost all credibility, and a lot of them are now in a bickering war within each other, making things even worse and being part of the corruptive narrative that they themselves are saying that they're not a part of. But yet they're feeding into it, and that's all they know. And they've actually believed that they're on the right side of justice, when in actuality, they're the biggest cause driving people away from either side. And so as conscious leaders, one of the things that I was very clear with on the piece is that you must be conscious and aware of the games being played by the people who say they have your best interest, but who only have their own interest in mind. And that's a really important fact for all of us to consider, especially on a day like today. Because I'm just going to tell you right now, you all are in for some shocks. You're in for, at least on one side of you, you're going to get slapped right across the face, thinking that you took this, that this is all yours. And in reality, you're going to find that the majority of us who did show up can't stand you. We just can't stand you anymore. You become so jaded in your opinion of just whatever you believe, and you become so emotional about it that you've lost sight of us as a people. And on the reverse end of that, some of the other side is doing things and making alliances with people that they really don't know how dark they really are, and are believing the hatred and the vitriol that they're sending out into the world, believing that by demolishing democracy that they can build something stronger, but in truth, they're just playing into anarchy. And so one of the things that conscious leaders are now going to be facing as we traverse these oceans that are really choppy is that for the next 2 years, you haven't seen anything yet. You thought that they were bad before. Now that they're gaining ground because of the way that we have pushed so many of the middle demographics away from us, now that they've gained so much ground, they're going to seize power and they're going to go hard at it. And so a lot of what we as Americans hold near and dear, regardless of what side we're on, are going to be starting to be stripped away from us further and further away. And so as conscious leaders, one of the things that we're going to have to start doing is really addressing the global concerns and removing the emotional bullshit that goes along with our own personal feelings on topics. I don't care if you are pro-life or pro-choice. I don't care if you believe that democracy is failing. That's what they want you to believe. They want you to be so inflicted in conflict that you can't show up and actually be of service to anyone. Because when you shoot vitriol into the universe, and when you sit there and argue with your friends over political things that are pretty much personal, when you put that into the universe, you don't realize that it lives forever. And that it isn't just influencing us in the 3D experience. It's part of judgment. It's what judgment is all about. And one of the references that I made with the sons of light and the sons of darkness. You're going to have to be really cautious now of who you side with in something that is personal by nature. What you believe and who you are as a divine being and a replication or an example of a divine will trying to manifest into our world is singular. And so you're going to have to literally start doing what I do, which is take the information, read it, absent of anyone else's opinion, and look at the topics and really research it. Obviously, I want to vote, and I would recommend that everybody do that, because even though I'm a man of principle, and I realize that for spiritualists and people who have kind of inside information into what's to come, what I realize is that it doesn't serve anybody for me then not to show up at all when the majority of our population has been convinced that they don't matter. Because I'm then showing up not just for myself, but I'm showing up to then represent the people who really, really are misguided. I want y'all to really think about this. We've raised children who believe that they don't even matter, that their voice is not heard, and that they have no power whatsoever. We've done that by instilling in them this fear-mongering and this belief that the corrupt are the only ones who can make it, but not showing them the higher road. In fact, all we've done is dance with the devil the entire time. All we've done is engage the other side at their level, dropping everyone in humanity at the same time. And what it's done is it's created a sense of chaos to what should be transitional. Where there's change, there is abrupt shakeups, right? But that's called being an adult. But emotionally throwing temper tantrums because we're not getting our way and then spewing that into the world saying, well, obviously the system is corrupt because I didn't get my way, is a temper tantrum. It's not a spiritual being speaking. That's an ego having a conniption fit because they didn't get their way. Because guess what? They might not be right. They may think that they are absolutely correct in what they believe, but they forget that they've removed everyone's rights to their own choices earlier, and now they're upset that their specific rights were taken away, or they believe that their hatred for minorities is spoken for all of humanity. And what it does is it breeds so much hatred and violence and so much negativity into the world that we've lost everyone who counts in the middle, right? Because all we hear from is the extreme left and the extreme right. And so what conscious leaders are going to have to start doing now is they're going to have to hold a fort in the middle and start getting back to the roots of the situation and really talking to people individually without castigating them every turn with your own BS belief system, right? I'm exceedingly spiritual, but I still have to live in the 3D experience. And what that means is I have to then be empowered to allow other people to have their opinions that differ from mine. And I have to be an adult to show up at the middle of the table and act like a moderator. Listen to all sides of an issue, which is what leadership is supposed to be. And then stand in the middle and say, okay, this is a possible solution to this situation where at least everybody gains a little bit of traction and nobody continually loses everything that they've been working so hard for. I mean, look at our world right now. Women made so much advances and now all of their rights are being stripped away because we are feeding into this belief system that the other side is an abomination because they disagree with us. And then we castigate them as extremists, further blurring who the actual extremists are within each house. And so we as leaders of any stature now have to literally take a step back because I'm telling you right now, you're in for a rough night. You're going to have a rough night because no matter which side of the coin you're on, you're going to literally see a fragmentation of the entire country. And it's putting us in a very dangerous situation because behind the scenes, the people pulling all the strings, doing the confetti effect to inflame crisis even where there's not, are purposely trying to break down democracy because they know that if that happens, that the country implodes. And just think of who gains in that situation, and the bells will go off in your head as to who has been connected to those dictators and to those people, and what the ties are that are now voicing the inflammation and throwing the bombs into our universe. And you're going to then have to take accountability for how duped you feel for having believed that they had your best interest in mind when all they were doing is getting money in the back end, because they are. A lot of them are getting paid in order to infuriate you so as to disempower us as a species. And what's going to happen with this election is that one side is going to claim that the system is broken if they didn't get their way and that we need to riot and do this and all this violence because that gets people angry on their side. And then the other side, if they don't win, is going to be like, well, democracy failed because I didn't get my emotional way and life is so hard for us and we're trying, you know what I mean? Like, it's just such bullshit. That what's happening is that the rest of us, the majority of the population who is at least awake enough to take a step back, we're going to be like, why would I ever listen to this whiny person over here? Why is their emotional range now in charge of politics? I mean, we've learned that you can't have church and state, but we can have, an emotional outburst from a grown man because he didn't get his way, throwing temper tantrums left and right. And so what it does is it pushes everybody in the middle, the moderation, the people that really, really can make the difference in elections. We're pushing them further and further away from both sides. And then what's unfortunate is there's no one then really powerful at representing the independent, the person in the middle. And so because we have two evils going on, the lesser of two evils essentially, America is literally stepping back and going, well, I guess I just don't matter. I guess my kids really don't have a future. Oh, I guess the world really is ending because that's what everybody's telling me. They're not getting their way, so they immediately throw this vitriol and bullshit into the universe that is disempowering every single human being on our planet, so as to then make money off of your misery, off of how angry they get you. Not to mention all of the pharmaceutical companies that then make a lot of money off of trying to keep you from being anxious, even though you're buying into an experience where you're listening to all the wrong people. So what I wanted to say with this piece is if you are a conscious leader, then I really need you to look at how you've been acting, because you're in for a rude awakening tonight. And what I want you guys to do is to not become disempowered by the realization that you were part of the problem. What we need you to do is do an about face and realize that though we believe in impassioned people, there's a time and a place for that. And if you're trying to reach middle America, and those of us who fall in the middle categories that are spiritual or intellectual or people who are on the fringes, you're not going to do it in the system and the methodology that you've been using, because you've just pushed me away. I literally sat there, I spent all last night literally looking at all of the ballots and all the things and literally tuning out every single person in the entire universe just to be able to go in and vote with my conscience. Because again, in the end, I'm the one who has to stand for my voting. But the one thing I didn't do is become so disempowered to believe that my voice didn't matter. I know what they're going to say, and so do you. There's no surprise here on that end. One side's going to say that it was rigged because it suits their needs, so that they can then throw temper tantrums and infuriate a very small demographic that is the most vocal. Then the other side, when they don't get their way, which is the rude awakening, are going to be so disenfranchised with the system, not realizing that it was because of their own actions why everything fell through for them, right? That is the way that things are panning out. And so as a species, we're going to have to find a better way to reconnect with each other, because we are heading for absolute self-destruction. That song kept playing in my head, actually, as I came on here. You're heading for self-destruction. I mean, we really are. Because you're allowing people to puppeteer you into enraging the opposition, forgetting that the people who you're trying to sway are observing your interaction between the two polar opposites. You sit there on news stations and all of this stuff, and you spout hatred, castigating entire demographics of people who really are just voting with their consciousness. And though I don't agree with their position on some things, I can at least acknowledge that they are divine still, trying to manifest something. So what is it that we're trying to fix? Where are these polarities existing from? Because they're the same spectrum. It's the same topics. They're just two opposing ends. And we're listening to only the extreme views of the left or the extreme views of the right, forgetting that all of America falls in between, and they fluctuate predominantly between the two sides. Most people have long ago left this idea that I belong to one house, because that house is as hypocritical as the other house. And so a lot of Americans are now working towards finding a middle ground, but because there's no representation of that middle ground anywhere, no one's standing in that position. They're not standing in that empowered state. They're allowing themselves to be pulled in either direction instead of just holding the fort in the middle and being a conscious leader and being like, hey, this isn't working. And just being like I'm doing, like it's just not working. So you yell at each other, you talk bad about each other, you put it out into the universe, and then you're surprised that you're losing so much more behind the scenes because of the way that you're emotionally responding to someone else triggering you. It's like someone's handing you a clear ticket that specifically says to you, I'm trying to goat you, I'm trying to goat you, what you gonna do? And what do? You snap at them. And then the entire world sees you, you get discredited, your entire empire falls down, and all middle America is going, well, why did you react to it? Well, because I'm all about emotions, and I love humanity. Well, if you loved humanity, you'd be serving it, not your own interests. And that's the truth. And so this is a major election. I know that it's just the midterms, but I'm telling you right now, this is nothing. This sets the stage for the next 2 years, where the devil plays his 3 people that are already in positions waiting for this, against the 3 that are going to be the opposing side in light. And this battle is going to rage, and it's going to rage very publicly. And so you and I, as everyday mortal beings and as humans that are existing in this fascinating time of transition, are going to have to start really, really investigating who we are aligning ourselves with. As long as both the Republican and the Democratic houses stay this vitriolly and this divisive and this hateful toward each other, they're going to lose everyone in their house. Because we can see where this is heading. This is heading towards an implosion of democracy in the number one country that represents it. because we're so caught up in fighting that the real criminals that are pushing all of this are able to then do whatever they want to do because we're so busy arguing about ridiculous things like, okay, so you want to build a wall, then build a fucking wall, but don't sit there and like pretend that you're doing it for humanity or for Americans. You're not. You're just, I mean, most of you aren't even from America. So you already are stepping into the argument hypocritically, right? But so build a freaking wall. I mean, I honestly don't care. It's not my experience, but what I'm saying to you is that if you do care that much about such a topic, then you being inflammatory about it and being hateful and being racist is not going to get you where you need to be, because most Americans are not even racist, right? They have their bigotry. I mean, everybody has some sort of bigotry, I guess, to some degree, but a lot of us have worked through their shadow, and so we're now representing something different. And so as this division grows increasingly bigger and bigger and bigger, you're starting to then disempower yourself by handing all of your power over to the people who are just trying to goat you into an argument. And what you're doing is you're demolishing your own houses. And that's the tragedy to the situation, is that there's a handful of people on both sides that are purposely destroying everything you believe in by making you look ridiculous. And they're making you so hateful that you lose your family, you lose your friends, you lose affiliations, you lose business contracts, you lose all of this stuff because you're buying into hate. And you're buying into the sons of darkness. You're buying into willful ignorance, believing that your hatred and bigotry and your racist ways and your sexist ways and your homophobic ways are the majority, when the reality is that it's not. And what you're then going to have to face is your shadow, and it's going to hit you right in the face. And then on the flip side, those of you who are pretending that your shit don't stink, it reeks. Because you have pushed more people away from your own side than the other side ever could have. With your emotional outbursts and your cries for emotional, manipulation. You've literally alienated the world. And what's happening is that the world is then now all in crisis and huge turmoil, missing the one thing that's needed, which is moderation. It needs moderates in between to stand firmly forward together and say, hey, this is not working. You're destroying our world. It doesn't matter that you think you're right. You can't take some rights away from people or take all rights from everybody and then complain that your rights individually as a smaller demographic is removed. You can't spread racism and hatred towards the world and then be surprised that the world has that same vantage point about us. You can't, you see what I'm saying? There's all of this hypocrisy going on that is bringing down everything that you hold near and dear to your life. And it's intentional. They are purposely manipulating you so as to ensure that you fall. You fall for it, you fall on your face, and you lose everything you worked for. Because what you're not realizing is that we represent everyone in our nation. We don't just represent our individual interests, and we've lost sight of that. We're so believing that either you can be only left or you can be only right, that now no one is able to do anything. Everything is in a stalemate. Nobody's doing anything. Children are still being raped and molested. There's still all of this hatred and violence towards women. All of these huge humanitarian crises are going on because we're so egoishly driven is the proper verbiage, that we are purposely then being the same assailants, but in different contexts to other people. And we're then claiming that our shit don't stink when it does. Everyone has shadow. I'm not a perfect person, neither are you. But our children really believe now that they don't matter. They believe that their voice doesn't count. And we did that. That was under our watch. Everyone on stage right now, this is your doing. Because what you've done is you've become so personalized with your ego and your emotion that you've forgotten that you are not God. That God is everyone in the planet. And that everyone is equal to each other. I don't matter any more than you matter. And so how do we then represent the voices of the collective consciousness? Because where we're heading is absolute destruction. And the people who are destroying it purposely know that, and they're making a lot of money in preparation for the downfall. Because they honestly don't care about the people that they're pretending to care about. And so as conscious leaders, as human beings, whether you get triggered by this message or not, it's pretty simple to see. We're heading towards a massive fight. And the only way to alleviate the strain of that without completely destroying everything in the process is to pull back, start identifying the conscious leaders who can really talk to each other and figure it out. Because the ones that are representing us right now, currently, at this present time, are doing everything except representing us. They're representing specialized interests. They're killing our children. They're allowing all of that to happen under BS, this, that, and the other. And meanwhile, you and I are sitting there going, well, our opinion doesn't matter because we've been taught that it doesn't matter. But we're not doing anything to change it. We're not removing these people. In fact, we're just adding more fire to them because we're believing the extremist points of view as being what the world or what the nation believes, when we know for a fact that's not true. That's why we have popular polls. We know the truth. We see it in demographics. But we're refusing to acknowledge and work within those demographics, and instead are paying all of our attention to either side of the coin that is the loudest and the most vitriol and the most hateful and the most, people denying genocide and saying all this. You're literally spending all of your time paying their salaries while they purposely work to destroy our democratic way of life. And whether you believe in democracy or not, I'm just going to tell you right now, America is built on it. So if you destroy it, you're destroying America. It's really simple. And then the worst part of it is that we're also then listening to people who are sitting there saying ridiculous things like there's no global warming or whatever it is, and we're still engaging in the conversation, and just instead of just stopping paying any of their salaries, right? One of the greatest blessings that we can do for each other at this point in time is stop endorsing people who are affiliated with these people. Pull out from anything that has to do with them on their account, public accounts. Stop working with them. Don't buy their products. Don't engage them in any way, shape, or form. Strangle them economically because that's what they're after, and suddenly they're going to grow a conscience. Think with your brain and then represent the soul. We as a collective consciousness are in danger right now because we're not even able to speak to each other. And what's been the casualty to it is our children now believe that they don't matter. I want you all to really take that in. I don't care what your personal opinion is on something, but the fact that our children are so disenfranchised with the world should be something that really breaks your heart and snaps you out of the bullshit. Because the battle that's about to ensue is going to be for our souls. It's going to be for our liberties and our freedoms, whatever side of the coin you're on. But as long as we're stuck in polarity and no one works towards that middle ground, both sides will lose. You cannot win by overpowering the other side in a democratic system. And so if you're against democracy, then you're an anarchist, and just name yourself an anarchist. Stop pretending that you are fighting for the freedoms of Americans when you're just trying to tear down everything that's existed. Great, I know, things are not good. Honestly, there are things that are just not working. But we can't fix them as long as everybody is in their corners, refusing to even remotely talk to each other. And so as I went to do the piece, and as I was going out to vote, the one thing that I was made very clear of is that we are in a battle for humanity. And there's no simple way to say that. Everyone on our planet matters. But no one feels valued right now because no one feels heard, because all we do is yell at each other and make the other person feel like shit for feeling whatever way there is. Like I said before, people out there who are against the pro-choice and are pro-life people, they're not Satan. They're just people that really just are disconnected from that logic and they don't want anything to do with it. So instead of dealing with that topic, what have we done? We've dealt with the people who are destroying it instead of trying to talk to the people who are in the middle, right? We have completely become so gaslit that we cannot talk cordially to each other. And what that has done is it has further disenfranchised our children. And these effects are going to be long-term. This is going to be generational. Whatever happens in the next 2 years from today on. And so it is time for us to grow up as a species and really start looking at the severity to what parts we've been playing in the destruction of our own world. Because when it's all said and done, the choices being made now don't just affect our 3D experience. It affects our children's and then their children's. And that's something that we need to really weigh and really take in so as to really grow up in time to really turn this around. This piece is not written so as to trigger you. It's to awaken you to the reality that it's just not working. And we really only have one option. And if I have to sit here and get yelled at or whatever because I spoke some truth to power, that's fine. Because I'm not pushing any agenda, I'm not speaking against either side, I'm speaking to them equally, because neither one smells good right now. And they're both acting like kids. And so no one wants to be part of those houses. And so what's trickling out is that then nobody wants to vote. And then if nobody votes, the only people who show up to vote are the extremists who've been propelling the traffic that way. And so humanity, Americans in particular, be prepared for your own outcomes, for what you have manifested with the vitriol and the hatred and divisiveness. And once it happens, acknowledge it. Don't emotionally blow up at each other and immediately take stock and level it in yourself. Ground your energy and say, shit, he was right. Well, now what? Well, now we go the other way. Now we have to start working towards each other. Because no one wants the economy to blow up and to implode like it's about to. No one wants the war that's coming in the civil, right? Because now we have so many different pockets doing so many different things that there's no cohesion to our kingdom. In fact, everything is so divided now that now we have people doing rogue militias in search of women doing, oh my God, it's like a whole thing. But the more conflicted we are and the more infighting that we're doing, we're also letting entire genocides and other things happen by people who are also funding the destruction that we're seeing in our own territory. And they're using people publicly to do it. And we know who they are. And so we can't even pretend that we weren't triggered by these people purposely, because they're getting paid money, like actual money, to do that. So I just wanted to be very clear with the piece, because I'm not pushing any side, and I'm not, as you notice, I didn't say anything about the topics necessarily on which way I believe or not believe. What I was just presenting you is the truth of things, which is we can't continue this way, because if we do, then everything we believe that really matters to us, that we think we're fighting for, falls, and it demolishes itself. And I really don't think that's what we're intending to do. But the people that we are supporting in several cases are purposely doing that. Because the more that we are in disarray and the more we suffer and the more that their egos are inflamed, the more money they make and the more they think they're going to walk away, forgetting that the divine is making its move. And you're going to want to make sure that you're on the right side as the boss moves forward, because he's in motion, it's in motion, she's in motion. So just be accountable for the judgment period that we're entering. And it begins by just being you and being true to who you are and voting. Vote. It's super important right now.